r/AskReddit. What is the dumbest rule your school ever had? We wore uniforms that were ordered from a magazine provided by the school. If our uniform skirts looked to be too short, they were measured with a ruler. Thin girls who wore a smaller size had slightly shorter skirts than everyone else. So we were constantly being sent to the principal's office for wearing the uniforms they required us to wear. I remember this. Summer uniform skirts must knee length. Winter uniform skirts must be ankle length. The only problem was that a skirt that was knee length at the start of summer could be too short by the end of summer if the person it belonged to grew, which people tend to do a lot of at school. Ankle length? When did you go to school? The 1800s? I wasn't allowed to wear a yellow raincoat because it reminded people of Columbine. It reminded me of Paddington Bear. Till yellow raincoat equals black trench coat. Hand in pocket equals armed civilian ready to rampage.
Claim your free AirPods today by clicking the first link in the description down below.
During middle school, the locker room lockers weren't allowed to be used because some students leave food in there. Surprise. Surprise. A lot of people got their hits stolen, and the administration didn't give a single duck. The school did nothing about it until a pet teacher got his iPod stolen. Then they started having people monitor the locker room occasionally. But theft still occurred. I didn't expect it to happen to me. What if he pretended it was stolen so they would do something? When I was in high school, one of my classmates was diagnosed with cancer. As a form of fundraising to help his family, some students/parents organized a t-shirt sale at the school where all the proceeds went to his family. Pretty much everyone ordered one, and the day they came in we all put them on over our usual uniform shirts. Later that day the principal came on the PA to say we all had to take the shirts off because visitors were coming to the school and he didn't want them to think we had substandard uniform regulations. For a school that preaches family, I thought that was completely ridiculous and kind of insulting. Edit. For anyone wondering, he beat the cancer and is totally okay now. In elementary school, a friend of mine sold bracelets to raise money for charity. The principal found out and confiscated the $50 in cash he had raised, citing something in the student handbook. I asked to see the handbook since we were never given one. She got angry, left, and came back after a little bit with a single sheet of paper that had typed on it, "Students are not allowed to sell things on school grounds." It was ducking ridiculous. Why do the such bitter people become teachers? We had to sign out to go to the bathroom, but if we signed out over 3 times a quarter, 9 weeks, we would get a grade deduction. Edit. I'll be at the school tomorrow. Should I call my teachers out for how many close calls I had in high school? What? Did they expect you to piss your pants instead? Nah, the 30 seconds they give you between classes is plenty of time. Our school had a uniform with a shirt as part of it. One year they switched the color to white shirts from navy. But because they had a cheap supplier, they were pretty see-through. As a result, every female student's bra was visible. Instead of acknowledging their mistake and changing the color back or just switching to a uniform manufacturer that didn't use fabric as thin as tissue paper, they implemented a bunch of rules about what color underwear girls were allowed to wear. It was only for girls. 2. A boy with a blue undershirt was fine. But a girl with a blue bra, heavens no. Everyone thought it was stupid, including many parents. But the official line was, if you wore tasteful clothes, this wouldn't be an issue. Having a rule that forces male teachers to comment on the bras of girls as young as 13 is pretty messed up. Emo. Especially when many of these children didn't even get to buy their own clothes, but relied on their parents. My Catholic school, kindergarten 8th grade, required everyone to wear a white button-up shirt. I guess white blouses in the 90s were pretty thin, though, because the principal made the religion teacher gather all the girls together to tell us that we needed to wear more tasteful bras. After that, the principal made our religion teach once again gather all the girls to tell us to make sure our undershirts that we used to cover up our wanton, tasteless 7th grade bras didn't have any kind of pattern on them. How about you just stop creeping on little kids? Gross principal. Not a Catholic school, but we also got lectures about wearing nude bras under our white shirts. It was so unsettling. It was an all-girls school. I think we were all aware that we had breasts. We don't need to panic over it. We could not sit on the ground. The reason for this was that people would have X, because that's exactly what happens when children sit on the ground. Well, when I was about 6 or so, a friend told me that X was when a boy's thing and a girl's thing touch. I did not seek clarification on what the things were, and so concluded that having X was when a boy and a girl touched any parts of their bodies. Period. My teacher was none the wiser when I sat cross-legged next to Andrew G on the floor, so that our knees were touching, and had X right under her nose for an entire story time. All I'm saying is that I can see where your teachers may have gotten confused. When my girls were in elementary school, they suddenly began coming in and saying the other one touched their private parts. Over the course of a few short days, private part touching was reported so much that I thought I was going to have to send them to therapy. Then I sat down and asked for specifics and found out that despite my having discussed such things with my girls and having shown them in my anatomy and physiology book where their private parts were, a well-meaning teacher had given a talk to the class about stranger danger sort of stuff. She had defined for them that a private place was anywhere you were touched that made you feel uncomfortable. The private place being reported was her elbow. Her sister grabbed her elbow. That made her uncomfortable. Thus it was a private place. So we had another anatomy refresher. If you drove to school, you had to park your car at least 1 kilometer away from the campus. Apparently so that the school would not be liable in the event that you died in a car crash. We weren't allowed to bring playing cards of any sort to school because it would look like we were gambling. This was when cell phones were just getting popular. So elementary school kids started having them, and schools had no idea how to adapt to this. Our school made a rule: everyone with a cell phone had to drop this in a bag at the principal's office before school and then pick it up after school was over. Gamma boys were also similarly confiscated. So yes, picture people having to line up to drop their Nokias and Gamma boys into a bag at the start of every day. Naturally, at one point, the bag and all its contents got stolen. Edit. Like people guessed, the school just shrugged and said, well, you shouldn't have brought your electronics in the first place when the bag was stolen. This was after a few weeks, though. By then most people wised up and just claimed to not have a phone. From what I remember, the bag contained about 30 phones/Gamma boys. Then we got into gambling in high school and could play cards or dice. Money could just not be visible. We just started keeping track of bets with tally marks. That's perfect because it just looks like a harmless game for points. You could only wear short-sleeved polos. Not long. It lasted a day. Since it was around winter. In my primary school, the younger half of the school had to wear shorts and white polos all year long. No exceptions. The older half had to wear button-up shirts all year and got the choice of wearing long trousers in winter. I lived in the south, and at our middle/high school we had to wear long pants and a tucked-in polo-style shirt. Was horrid on the 110-degree days with 100% humidity. No reading during lunch. Lunch is for friends, so you can talking during lunch and not class. We would have to take books away from students who were reading. It was awful for the loner kids. Anything that was not a meal was banned from lunch. Students who brought a pencil, their phone, a binder, or anything else had to give it to the teacher. The rule was repealed after one day when we called them communists trying to limit our freedom. They were sick of people shouting "better dead than red" in the halls. Edit. This post is getting quite popular, so I thought you guys might want more context. In 7th grade, we learned about the Red Scare, a period of Americans freaking out over suspected communists. Our teacher showed up a poster that read "better dead than red," which was adapted from Nazis. We translated it into German. "Lieber tot als rot," I think, and would proceed to shout it in history. Our teacher was super chill and didn't really mind. When we took this to hallways, it didn't go over so well. Probably because they are commie-loving freedom haters for McCarthy. However, we still do it occasionally, even though it's not that funny anymore. The American solution. Just call them commies. No socks with logos on them, because they could distract other people's learning environments. Did your classmates spend a lot of time investigating the socks of others? Ironically, the rule made everybody start checking out each other's socks. You had 2 minutes to get from one class to the next. Sounds good on paper, until you realize we had one-way halls only, and if your next class was on the other side of the school, you were pretty much ducked. If you were late to class, you had to go to detention the entire period. What made this rule more ducking stupid was that you couldn't take your backpack into class, so you had to put it into your locker. So between each class, you had to put your books away and get your other books for the next class, eating up your time to get to the next class. Eventually the school got rid of the time rule and the backpack rule when they realized how stupid it was. My school had a 5-minute moving time between lessons when I was in year 7. But in year 8 we moved into a new site, and for some reason they decided to get rid of moving times. This meant you had 0 minutes to move between classrooms. But there were 5 school buildings: humanities, design, science, pet, and drama/dance etc. subjects. 3 out of the 5 buildings having 3 floors. It took about 5 minutes to move between rooms depending on where your next class was, eating up lesson time. Thankfully they didn't give us detention or anything if we did turn up late. We had a 5-minute moving period, but half the teachers took it as a let's keep the lesson going for 5 more minutes rule. You would often end up late to stuff. Then again, the worst one was the class I took that didn't seem to have a set room when I went to 6th form. This got worse. We had some classes in a completely separate building. The building was a good 3-5 minutes from the exit to the entrance of the actual 6th form. This got worse when you realize that one of the classes was on the 3rd floor of an offset stairwell in the back. Constantly late from that building. I taught at a school where students couldn't be in the hallways during lunch for any reason at all. My last week there my students wanted to throw me a going away party in my classroom during lunch. I told them it wasn't necessary but they insisted, which I thought was a nice gesture. About 5 minutes into lunch no students had stopped by, and when I went into the hallway they were standing there in front of another teacher who was telling them they couldn't go to my room. When I politely approached my colleague and explained the situation, she tried to stand steadfast and tell me no, even after I told her they had permission and they'd be under my supervision the entire time. She still said no. Finally, knowing it was my last week, I told my students to go to my room anyway because I wasn't having this hit. And it wasn't fair to my students who'd spent a lot of money on a cake. My colleague went and told our boss who pretty much just ignored her. Guess who's not getting a cake when she leaves? Funny thing was that she was retiring. The school had a shindig for her, but not one student gave her anything. They tried to make halls and stairways one way. It lasted maybe a year. We have a one-way corridor at my school. It doesn't work at all. I went to a school with really thin corridors, so they were all one way. One day, there was a leak in the ceiling, so they had to block off an entire section and make one of them two-way. Chaos ensued. Kids were literally running face first into each other and falling, causing kids behind them to trip, causing a massive balloop. I was unlucky enough to get caught in the middle of one of them and almost got crushed under a wall of students. It was kinda terrifying, but at the same time pretty hilarious watching all the robots trying to function without their instructions. I don't miss that school. It was the Pokemon craze of 1997. Teachers were sick of students being so distracted by Pokemon. They banned cards and anything related to Pokemon at our school. If we uttered the word Pokemon we'd be suspended. We called them pocket monsters instead. Teacher didn't get it. Lol awesome. My elementary school took the safety first rule to mean that anything where someone got hurt became banned. This meant that any popular game inevitably got banned after a few days. After the conventional games like basketball, soccer, tag, etc. got banned, we were left with safe games. Then they banned yo-yoing after a kid got hit with one. Invisible sword fights, jump ropes. Once they banned all physical activities, things started to be banned for causing emotional harm. TCGs, Magic, Pokemon, slumber party games, Mayfair, Detective. It became a game in itself to see how quickly you could get something banned. They wondered why kids couldn't pay attention in class. This rule hurts me emotionally. Ban emotions? All boys had to have short hair. No hair below the earlobe. If it is, then you had to go to the headmaster to get your head shaved completely. No exceptions. Not even religion. This was an area with a high Sikh population. It is against their religion to cut their hair. The headmaster was racist and implemented the rule to try and drive Sikh pupils to another school. What happened to Sikh pupils? They called in Sikh. Harry Potter books are banned by the principal. No one enforces it cause it's ducking stupid.